The boarding passes slipped from my trembling fingers, scattering across the polished airport floor like fallen leaves. Tears blurred the harsh fluorescent lights as I watched my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, stride toward security, their laughter echoing back like shards of glass. They believed they were finally escaping, embarking on the dream vacation I had meticulously planned for them, a trip to Paris meant to heal old wounds and bridge the chasms that had formed between us. They thought I was defeated, a discarded piece in their carefully constructed family portrait. But they were wrong. The game had just begun. If your family has ever made you feel like an outsider, subscribe now to see how Avery turns the tables. The truth was, I had poured my heart and soul into planning this Parisian getaway for my parents. After years of strained silences and awkward holiday dinners, I genuinely believed I could mend the fractured bonds that time and resentment had created. My name is Avery, and ever since I was little, I always felt like the black sheep. Maybe it was because I pursued a career in travel, a world away from my brother's predictable path in finance. Or maybe it was simply that I was different. I yearned for their approval, a simple nod of acceptance that said, "You belong." So when my parents cautiously mentioned their lifelong dream of visit in Paris, I jumped at the opportunity. I spent months researching the best hotels, securing reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants, and crafting a personalized itinerary that catered to their every whim. I even managed to snag tickets to a private wine tasting in Burgundy, knowing how much my father appreciated a good vintage. The hours I invested felt like a labor of love, a tangible expression of my desire for connection. I imagined us strolling along the Seine, sharing croissants in charming cafes, and finally, truly seeing each other. I envisioned the trip as a turning point, a chance to rewrite our family history. The weeks leading up to their departure were filled with a nervous excitement. I meticulously packed their suitcases, ensuring they had everything they needed, from comfortable walking shoes to elegant evening attire. I even included a handwritten guide filled with insider tips and hidden gems, hoping to add a touch of magic to their experience. But the idyllic facade shattered just days before their scheduled flight. A casual phone call with my brother, Mark, quickly devolved into a venomous tirade. He accused me of trying to buy my way back into the family, of using the trip as a pathetic attempt to gain their favor. "You think a fancy vacation will erase everything?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're still not welcome here, Avery. You never will be." His words were like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I tried to defend myself, to explain my genuine intentions, but he wouldn't listen.
He accused me of manipulating our parents, of trying to undermine his relationship with them. The conversation ended with a chilling warning. "Stay away, Avery. You've caused enough damage already." I hung up the phone, numb with disbelief. His words echoed in my mind, confirming my deepest fears. I was an outsider, destined to forever remain on the fringes of my own family. The pain was excruciating, a deep ache that settled in my bones. But beneath the hurt, a flicker of something else ignited, a cold, simmering rage. I realized then that my efforts to reconcile were futile. I had been naive to believe that they would ever truly accept me. The drive to the airport felt like a slow march to my own execution. I plastered a fake smile on my face, determined to play the part of the dutiful daughter, the loving sister. As I helped my parents check their luggage, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. My brother stood beside them, his gaze fixed on me with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. I knew he was watching me, waiting for me to slip up, to reveal the turmoil that raged within. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. I hugged my parents goodbye, offering a silent prayer that they would have a wonderful trip, completely aware that they wouldn't be going anywhere. As they walked towards security, I saw my brother turn back, a smug smirk plastered across his face. He raised his glass of champagne in a mock toast, his eyes glinting with triumph. That's when I knew, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that I couldn't let them get away with this. The person I trusted most was one of them. It was my own mother who sent the text. "Make sure you are not at the airport." The text from my mother was like a punch to the gut, each word a searing brand on my soul. "Make sure you are not at the airport." It replayed in my mind, an endless loop of betrayal and calculated cruelty. The realization that my own mother, the woman who had nurtured me, comforted me, and guided me through life, was actively working against me was almost unbearable. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the familiar landscape of my life morphing into a treacherous and unrecognizable terrain. I stumbled back to my car, the weight of the revelation crushing me. The drive home was a blur, the city lights blurring into streaks of meaningless color. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as I fought to maintain control, both of the car and of my emotions. How could they do this to me? How could they so casually dismiss my feelings, my efforts, my very existence? The questions swirled in my head, a tempest of confusion and pain. I replayed past conversations, searching for clues, for any indication that this level of deceit was possible. But there was nothing, only a carefully constructed facade of normalcy, a web of lies spun so intricately that I had been completely blinded.
Sleepless nights became my new reality. The darkness was a canvas for my racing thoughts, each one a brushstroke of anguish and resentment. I tossed and turned, unable to find a comfortable position, both physically and mentally. The image of my family, gleefully anticipating their Parisian adventure, haunted me. I imagined them laughing, exploring, creating memories that I would never be a part of. The thought was like a knife twisting in my chest. During the day, I tried to function, to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I went to work, answered emails, and attended meetings, but my mind was always elsewhere, replaying the events, searching for answers. I forced myself to eat, but the food tasted like ash in my mouth. I tried to engage in conversations with friends, but my words felt hollow, devoid of genuine emotion. I was a ghost, going through the motions of life, but not truly living. Every notification on my phone made my heart leap with dread, scared if it was my family. The fear of further betrayal gnawed at me, poisoning every interaction. I found myself withdrawing from the world, isolating myself in my apartment, surrounded by the physical reminders of the trip that would never be. The carefully curated guidebooks, the elegant luggage tags, the silk scarf I had chosen for my mother, they were all testaments to my shattered dreams. I tried to confront my mother, to understand her motives, but my calls went unanswered. My texts were met with silence. It was as if I had ceased to exist in their world. My brother, emboldened by their collective rejection, continued his campaign of harassment. He sent me taunting messages, bragging about their lavish experiences in Paris, knowing that each word was a fresh wound. I blocked his number, but the damage was already done. His words echoed in my mind, fueling my anger and resentment. I considered reaching out to my father, clinging to the hope that he might be different, that he might offer some semblance of understanding. But I knew deep down that he would side with my mother and brother. He always had. I was alone, adrift in a sea of betrayal and rejection. My attempts to mend the fractured bonds of my family had backfired spectacularly, leaving me more isolated and vulnerable than ever before. The weight of their injustice settled upon me like a shroud, suffocating my spirit and dimming my light. I had reached rock bottom, stripped of my illusions, and forced to confront the harsh reality of my family's animosity. And in that darkness, a new resolve began to form. It was a quiet, simmering determination to reclaim my power, to expose their lies, and to exact a measure of revenge for the pain they had inflicted upon me. The game was far from over. It was just beginning. I would expose the truth. They would not see it coming. The silence of my apartment was deafening, a constant reminder of my solitude. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching the objects that once held so much promise, the travel brochures, the maps of Paris, the carefully chosen gifts. Each was a painful reminder of my failed attempt to connect with my family, a symbol of their rejection. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of their betrayal pulling me under. Sleep offered no escape, only a relentless replay of their faces, their words, their actions. I saw the smirk on my brother's face as he raised his champagne glass, the cold indifference in my mother's eyes as she sent that single text. The memories were like shards of glass, cutting me from the inside out. I stopped eating, lost interest in my appearance, and neglected my work. My once organized apartment became a reflection of my inner turmoil, a chaotic mess of unwashed dishes, unfolded laundry, and scattered papers. I was spiraling downwards, losing myself in a vortex of despair. One evening, I found myself standing on my balcony, staring out at the city lights. The world stretched out before me, a vast and indifferent landscape. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself from a distance. The thought crossed my mind to just let go, to end the pain, to silence the voices, to disappear from a world that didn't seem to want me. The darkness tugged at me, whispering promises of peace and oblivion. I leaned further over the railing, the wind whipping through my hair. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors, and for a moment I felt a sense of calm. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark of anger, of resentment, of pure, unadulterated rage. They wanted me gone. They wanted me broken. They wanted me to disappear. And I almost gave them what they wanted. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because if I gave up, they would win. They would be free to continue their lives, their lies, their charade of a perfect family without ever facing the consequences of their actions. And that was something I couldn't allow. I stepped back from the railing, my heart pounding in my chest. The darkness receded, replaced by a fierce determination. I would not let them break me. I would not let them silence me. I would not let them win. I turned away from the city lights, my gaze fixed on the reflection in the window. I saw a stranger staring back at me, a woman with haunted eyes and a hardened expression. But beneath the pain, I saw a flicker of something else, a burning ember of resolve.
I spent the next few days in a daze, slowly piecing myself back together. I started with the basics: showering, eating, and sleeping. I forced myself to go to work, to engage with my colleagues, to pretend that everything was normal. But beneath the surface, a transformation was taking place. I was no longer the naive, trusting woman who had desperately sought her family's approval. I was something else entirely, something colder, harder, and more determined. I began to meticulously analyze everything that had happened, searching for clues, for weaknesses, for opportunities. I replayed conversations, scrutinized emails, and examined photographs, piecing together the puzzle of their betrayal. I realized that their biggest vulnerability was their arrogance. They believed they were untouchable, that their lies would never be exposed. They underestimated me, and that was their fatal mistake. I started documenting everything: the text messages, the emails, the phone calls. I created a detailed record of their actions, their words, and their motivations. I knew that if I was going to expose them, I needed irrefutable evidence. I needed to build a case that was so airtight, so damning, that they couldn't possibly deny it. I also started researching their lives, digging into their pasts, searching for secrets that they had desperately tried to keep hidden. I discovered things that shocked me, things that made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. My brother's seemingly perfect career in finance was built on a foundation of shady deals and questionable ethics. My mother's carefully constructed image of a devoted wife and mother concealed a history of infidelity and manipulation. And my father's respected position in the community masked a long-standing pattern of deceit and control. The more I learned, the more determined I became to expose their true nature. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. They would fight back. They would try to discredit me. They would do everything in their power to protect their reputations. But I was prepared. I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. I started making plans, carefully crafting a strategy that would maximize their exposure and minimize my own risk. I knew that I couldn't confront them directly. They would simply deny everything and try to turn the tables on me. I needed to find a way to reveal the truth without revealing my own involvement. I began to explore different options, considering everything from anonymous tips to leaked documents to carefully orchestrated social media campaigns. I knew that the key was to control the narrative, to present the evidence in a way that would be impossible to ignore. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. I worked tirelessly, fueled by a burning desire for justice. I was no longer a victim. I was a planner, a strategist, a force to be reckoned with. And I was ready to unleash my revenge.
The feeling of the cold steel in my hands gave me all the power I needed. I decided against a frontal assault. My family thrived on drama, on playing the victim. No, my revenge would be surgical, precise, and deniable. First, I needed leverage, something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. My brother's firm, the one he constantly bragged about, was a cesspool of insider trading. I'd heard him on countless calls, boasting about guaranteed returns and foolproof strategies. I remembered one specific conversation, scribbled on a napkin during a family dinner, a merger deal involving a pharmaceutical company. The details were vague, but enough to start digging. I created a burner email account and a fake LinkedIn profile, posing as a disgruntled investor. I started peppering industry forums and message boards with carefully worded questions, hinting at irregularities in the pharmaceutical merger. The goal wasn't to directly accuse anyone, but to plant seeds of doubt, to attract the attention of someone who might be investigating. It worked. Within days, I received an anonymous message from a user with the handle TruthSeeker77. They claimed to be a former employee of my brother's firm and offered to provide me with information, for a price. I agreed, setting up a secure encrypted chat. The information TruthSeeker77 provided was a goldmine. Documents, emails, and even recorded phone calls, all detailing the illegal trades and the individuals involved. My brother was at the center of it all, orchestrating the scheme and reaping the rewards. But there was more: evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and even bribery. The scope of their corruption was staggering. I meticulously organized the information, creating a digital dossier that would be impossible to ignore. Next, my mother. Her pristine image was her shield, her carefully constructed persona as the perfect socialite and philanthropist. But I knew there was a darkness beneath the surface. I hired a private investigator, someone discreet and resourceful, to dig into her past. It wasn't cheap, but the investment was worth it. The investigator uncovered a string of affairs, hidden bank accounts, and even a secret real estate portfolio. My mother had been living a double life for years, using her charitable foundation as a front for her illicit activities. I compiled this information as well, adding it to my growing arsenal of incriminating evidence. My father was the most difficult target. He was a master of deception, a skilled manipulator who had always managed to stay one step ahead of the game. He was a respected figure in the community, a pillar of society. To expose him, I needed something truly damning, something that would shatter his carefully crafted image beyond repair. I remembered a conversation I'd overheard years ago, a hushed phone call between my parents. They were discussing a legal case, a lawsuit involving a former business partner. I didn't understand the details at the time, but I remembered my father sounding anxious, desperate. I started digging into old court records, searching for any mention of the lawsuit. It took weeks, but eventually I found it. The lawsuit involved allegations of fraud and embezzlement. My father had been accused of stealing millions of dollars from his business partner, leaving him financially ruined. The case had been settled out of court, with a confidentiality agreement that prevented the details from being made public. But I knew that if I could find a way to break that agreement, I could expose my father's true nature. I contacted the former business partner, a man named David, who was now living in a small town, struggling to make ends meet. I explained my situation, telling him that I had evidence that could help him reopen the case. He was hesitant at first, afraid of the consequences, but I convinced him that it was time for the truth to come out. I provided him with the documents I had found, and he agreed to cooperate. Together, we filed a motion to vacate the settlement agreement, arguing that it had been obtained through coercion and fraud. The motion was granted, and the case was reopened. The media went wild, and my father's reputation was shattered overnight. The final piece of the puzzle was timing. I needed to unleash all of this information at once, creating a tidal wave of scandal that would overwhelm my family's defenses. I chose the day of their annual charity gala, a lavish event that they used to showcase their wealth and influence. I knew that the media would be there in full force and that the event would be live-streamed online. It was the perfect stage for my grand finale. I drafted an anonymous email to every major news outlet,
including the documents, the recordings, and the evidence I had gathered. I set the email to be sent automatically, just as the gala was beginning. The world was about to learn the truth about my family, and I was ready to watch it all burn. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but I knew I had to remain patient. The storm was coming. The gala was their monument to vanity, a glittering facade built on a foundation of lies. I imagined them there, basking in the adoration, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. My fingers hovered over the send button, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. This was it, the point of no return. Once the email was sent, there would be no going back. Their lives would be irrevocably changed, their carefully constructed world shattered into a million pieces. A wave of doubt washed over me. Was I doing the right thing? Was I justified in unleashing such devastation? But then I remembered their faces, their words, their actions. I remembered the pain they had inflicted upon me, the betrayal, the rejection, and the doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. They had made their choices. Now they would face the consequences. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and clicked send. The email was released into the digital ether, carrying its payload of truth and destruction. I leaned back in my chair, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was done. Now all that was left was to wait. The first sign of the storm came just minutes after the email was sent. My phone started buzzing incessantly, notifications flooding the screen. News alerts, social media mentions, emails from unknown numbers. The story was breaking. The charity gala, once a beacon of elegance and sophistication, descended into chaos. Guests whispered among themselves, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. My brother, mid-speech, was visibly trembling, his face ashen. My mother, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew, was frantically whispering into her phone. My father, his usual composed demeanor shattered, was pacing back and forth, his eyes darting around the room. The live stream cut out abruptly, replaced by a static screen. The organizers scrambled to regain control, but the damage was already done. The news spread like wildfire, amplified by social media and cable news. Headlines screamed of fraud, embezzlement, and infidelity. My family's name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, was now associated with scandal and disgrace. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the rotten core beneath. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my apartment, a sense of detached satisfaction washing over me. They were finally getting what they deserved.
But the real turning point came when the authorities got involved. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, announced an investigation into my brother's firm, freezing their assets and seizing their records. The IRS launched an audit into my mother's charitable foundation, uncovering a web of illegal transactions. And the local police department reopened the investigation into my father's former business partner, interviewing witnesses and gathering evidence. My family was under siege, surrounded by investigators and reporters. They were trapped, their lies exposed, their secrets revealed. I knew that it was only a matter of time before they started turning on each other, desperate to save themselves. And that's exactly what happened. My brother, facing the prospect of jail time, offered to cooperate with the authorities, providing them with incriminating information about his colleagues and his family. My mother, desperate to protect her reputation, blamed everything on my father, claiming that she was just an innocent bystander. And my father, realizing that his empire was crumbling, tried to flee the country, only to be apprehended at the airport. Their downfall was complete. They had lost everything: their wealth, their status, their freedom. And it was all thanks to me. The plan was coming together perfectly. My brother, desperate to cut a deal, offered up information on everyone, including our parents, in exchange for a lighter sentence. He became the star witness for the prosecution, detailing the intricate web of illegal activities within his firm. He confessed to insider trading, money laundering, and bribery, implicating numerous high-profile individuals. His testimony was devastating, confirming everything that I had revealed in my anonymous email. My mother, cornered and desperate, attempted to deflect blame by claiming that she was unaware of my father's illicit activities. She portrayed herself as a naive victim, manipulated by her husband and son. But her carefully constructed facade crumbled under scrutiny, revealing a pattern of deceit and self-serving behavior. The evidence of her hidden bank accounts and secret real estate holdings was irrefutable, exposing her complicity in the family's criminal enterprise. My father, stripped of his power and influence, became a pariah.
His attempts to defend himself were met with skepticism and scorn. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. He was abandoned by his friends, his colleagues, and even his own lawyers. He was alone, facing the consequences of his actions. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A voice, distorted and menacing, spoke on the other end. "You think you've won? This isn't over. We know who you are." The line went dead. A chill ran down my spine. They knew. And now, the game had truly begun.
The distorted voice on the phone lingered in my mind, a chilling reminder that my actions had consequences. They knew who I was. The hunter had become the hunted. But I refused to be intimidated. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. I doubled down on my security, changing my locks, installing a surveillance system, and varying my routine. I refused to let fear dictate my actions. My revenge was not just about punishing my family. It was about reclaiming my life, about breaking free from their control. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and family drama. My brother's testimony continued to expose the depth of their corruption, revealing the names of prominent politicians, business leaders, and even law enforcement officials who had been complicit in their schemes. My mother's attempts to portray herself as a victim were met with increasing skepticism as more and more evidence of her involvement came to light. And my father, isolated and desperate, lashed out at everyone, blaming them for his downfall. He was a broken man, stripped of his power and prestige, facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. The trial became a national spectacle, captivating the public with its tales of greed, betrayal, and deceit. The media dissected every detail, analyzing every witness statement, scrutinizing every piece of evidence. The world was watching, and my family's dirty laundry was on full display. The climax arrived during my father's cross-examination. The prosecutor, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for being ruthless, cornered him with a series of pointed questions, forcing him to admit to his crimes. He squirmed, he dodged, he tried to deflect blame, but the prosecutor was relentless. Finally, he broke down, confessing to his role in the embezzlement scheme and implicating my mother in the cover-up. The courtroom erupted in chaos. My mother gasped, her face contorted with rage and disbelief. My brother smirked, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes, and my father hung his head in shame, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. My father was sentenced to 20 years in prison. My mother received a 10-year sentence, and my brother, despite his cooperation, was sentenced to 5 years. Justice had been served. As the bailiffs led my parents away in handcuffs, it caught their eyes. My mother's gaze was filled with hatred, her lips curled into a snarl. My father's eyes were empty, devoid of emotion. He looked like a ghost of his former self, a shell of the man I once knew. I felt nothing. No pity, no remorse, no satisfaction. Just a profound sense of emptiness.
The fallout was swift and devastating. My brother's firm collapsed, its reputation ruined beyond repair. Many of his colleagues were also charged with crimes, their careers and lives destroyed. My mother's charitable foundation was shut down, its assets seized by the government. Her social circle evaporated, her friends abandoning her in droves. And my father's legacy was forever tainted, his name becoming synonymous with greed and corruption. They lost everything, their wealth, their status, their freedom. Everything they had worked so hard to achieve was gone, reduced to ashes. I watched it all from a distance, a silent observer of their destruction. The weight on my shoulders lessened with each passing day, the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long slowly dissipating. I started to rebuild my life, focusing on my own happiness and well-being. I reconnected with old friends, pursued my passions, and rediscovered my sense of self. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was free. The call finally came, the one I knew would arrive eventually. It was from my father, calling from prison. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's me," he said, his voice weak and raspy. "I just wanted to say, I understand." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, dumbfounded. Did he really understand? Or was it just another manipulation?
another attempt to control me? I would never know. And I didn't care. I went to their sentencing. The news cameras flashed, capturing every painful moment. As the judge read their sentences, decades for my father, a shocking number of years for my mother, and even my brother, despite his deal, wasn't spared. I saw their faces crumble. My brother, the golden boy, wept openly. My mother, always so composed, looked like a cornered animal. But my father, he just stared straight ahead, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place in his eyes. Maybe it was resignation. Maybe it was the faintest glimmer of understanding. Maybe it was just the madness of a man who had lost everything. They lost everything. I just smiled. It was over. The cycle of pain was finally broken. I walked away from the courthouse, the weight of the world lifted from my shoulders. I was free. Free from their lies, free from their manipulation, free from their control. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a survival mechanism, a way to reclaim your power when someone tries to take it away. It's not about gloating or reveling in someone else's suffering. It's about setting boundaries, about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be a victim. It's about justice. It's about peace. It's about finally being able to move on. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.